I found THCV by total accident because I have really bad glaucoma and I'm allergic to everything, all the eye drops. So they said try weed. I'll tell you now, it doesn't work. But one thing that happened while I was trying to find something that I could take that I wasn't, either sleepy or high or having a good time, and I couldn't find a concoction that worked. But when I was in Colorado, I met a woman who told me about THCV in a weed store. And when I finally gave up on marijuana, it didn't work for me for my glaucoma, everyone said, but God, you've lost so much weight. That's where it began. Because I've been only doing THCV products because I get terrible munchies from any cannabinoid. That's when I started looking into it. That followed by me finding someone that would make it. I was buying it all over the place. I just made the dose literally based on what I was using, and I figured, and you're gonna think this is tragic for a scientist because I have like 70 published papers, real science on transplantation, and won a few awards back in the day. So this isn't science, but I said if it works for me, it'll work for everyone because I've been fat my whole life and nothing's ever worked. And so far it has. But it's been out for 2 years. We call it way less because it's way less toxic than the semaglutides and way less expensive. I'm really proud of it. Interestingly, I picked a dose of 25 milligrams 3 years ago for each one, pure THCV. That's sort of become a standard high dose. And so when I picked it, and if you do a ChatGPT search, and everyone who was here before heard me talk about how everything you find on THCV, on the internet, is untrue, essentially everything. Because what happens is there's very little information. It was put in when ChatGPT was populated with information, and it's just recycling, and it just becomes more true the more times it's repeated. So until new information goes into the mix, it won't come out unless it comes in through scientific channels. All right. So what are the basics about it? So I can't go through all the cannabinoid stuff, but basically THC is on the left, all right, and on the right is THCV. It should be the other way around, but I was tired. You can see the differences here in the side chain. Do you see this? It's 5 or 3 on there. It's propyl or pentyl. Those are the choices. If you have 5, you've got weed, THCV. Otherwise, 3 is THCV, 5 is plain THC. All right. So it's a minor cannabinoid. It's prevalent in hemp. Lots of it in hemp, very little in weed. Like 1%, and only the strains primarily African derived. Durban poison is the OG. That's what the lady told me about. And you can now, there's a lot of information out there, so you can now find the history of all these strains. And if you're interested in not getting the munchies from weed, you can either take away less, which will kill the munchies from anything. 25 milligrams is a great anti-munchie dose for a whole day. Or you can buy something that has just a little bit of THCV in it. The most you'll ever get is 1%. It didn't used to be possible to get it anywhere other than Durban poison, but it's everywhere now, and I brought some. You can get it, and the reason is because now they distill it from CBD oil, the CBD, the THCV. There's so little of it in hemp that they couldn't do it well. So all these products in the weed store and this one in the CBD store, they're using THCV to make them less munchy, and they're promoting them for energy and stuff. So there's no science for any of that. I'll just start with that. I'm not going to give you any science for anything except appetite. All the rest is animal model stuff. It's good. I believe a lot of it, and it all makes perfect sense. But I'm not going to stand here and do what they do on the internet and tell you it's science, because I'd be lying to you. I'll show you, I'll give you some idea of what it says, but let's not be boring. All right, so Laurel's law number 1 is assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. And every time I break it, like last night, something bad happens, but I'm happy to be here. So I'm not going to assume you know what a receptor is. Is there anyone here that doesn't know what a receptor is? Cool. Well, then you know that the CB1 receptor has various binding sites. Interesting thing about THCV is it physically blocks the site. In other words, it sits on the site and blocks it so that THC can't land. That's very unusual. Usually it's a chemical bonding. Here it's actually a physical obstruction. So when it lands on the receptor, it's a saturation phenomenon. So remember the THC and THCV. This is what you need to remember because it makes everything so clear. They're essentially the same compound pharmacologically, which is why if you take THCV, you're going to have weed metabolites, THC metabolites in your urine. You're going to have a dirty urine. Not if they do a mass spectrometry to pick up the differences in the metabolic pathway. But at first, I was promised that wasn't the case, but now I've tested a lot of people. If you take way less, it's likely on most standard drug tests, unless it's employment and federal, you're gonna test positive. And it's true for every THCV product because they go through the same metabolic product pathway and they generate the same metabolites. Albeit in small quantities, but the tests are very sensitive, so you're gonna have a false positive test unless they do a mass spec pickup, okay? So THCV effects are dose dependent, okay? They're biphasic. What does that mean? They're different at low dose than they are at high dose. It's an actual competitive inhibitor of THC. That means they fight one-to-one basically. They get up there and they battle for the same receptor. So, and the more receptors there are, the greater impact either one has. So in an area that has a ton of CB1 receptors, if you take THC or THCV, you're going to have a much more profound response. One of those areas, as you probably heard in other lectures, is the hypothalamus, which is loaded with them. And so that's why the taste and smell of food stimulates the hypothalamus, and all these hormones are released. The most important, we'll get to in a millisecond, is epinephrine. But anyway, all these things give you, they're all stimulated by THC in a cascading thing that creates the munchies. So what is THCV? It's a kissing first cousin with that one base pair difference, and when it sits on the receptor and physically blocks it, it's like a switch. So THC turns the switch on and THCV turns it off. It's a pure agonist. Now, interestingly, THC is a pure agonist, THCV is a pure antagonist. So what's really important about THC and what makes it so special and exciting, honestly, is that it's a neutral blocker at CB1. Now, why is that important? All right, think about it this way. The CB1 receptor is like a balancing receptor. Some of the inputs are stimulating and some of them are dampening. Throughout the nervous system, THCV's effect all the way is to modulate. It's everything I'm not. It's patient. So fascinatingly, you know, whatever system it's acting on, it's the one that calms it down. It stops anxiety, paranoia, agitation, nausea, vomiting, hypermotility of the stomach. I mean, I could go on. All of these things are improved with THCV. It's the balance for what we call the pure you know, they call it agonist for a reason. It's agony. You know, it's like getting beaten with Adderall, lots of it all the time, and you're just very, very depleted. THCV restores the balance at all these neural pathways. It's a very soothing, neurologically soothing thing. So this is why, and it has effects at it has effects at both the CB1 and CB2 receptor. These are the physiologic processes. So these are the physiologic processes, all of these. But if you look at them, there's a role postulated for all of these. There's really only decent science for appetite control, but there's ancillary animal models proving every aspect of this. They're crummy studies, but they're clear. So, I mean, what's needed is a lot of science, and that takes a lot of money. And that's gonna have to be funded by the cannabis industry, I'm sure, because if there's no money in it, people are not interested in paying in big pharma. Which brings me to something I really want to talk about, which is the Rimonabant disaster. So this tells you everything you need to know about THCV and more, and it's really not in the literature. Rimonabant is and was a non-approved, taken off away before FDA approval. It was tested in Europe. It's a synthetic THCV. The only difference is it's an agonist property. So remember I said the most important thing about THCV is it's a neutral antagonist. this drug that they made, rimonabant, it has agonist properties like THC. So the study was amazing. They went through four double-blind clinical trials, and everybody was so excited. It corrected blood sugar, insulin, lowered leptin. I mean, addressed all of the things in something called metabolic syndrome, which is why THCV is so exciting. It holds the promise, I believe, to cure this complex problem called metabolic syndrome, which affects 1.9 billion people worldwide. That's a 2015 estimate. So they made this THCV-like drug, and they confirmed that it was acting the same way that THCV does. And everyone got better. All their numbers so metabolic syndrome is complex system disorder where all the disease processes are believed to contain the same metabolic problem. So it cascades. It starts with abnormal blood sugars, ends up with fat accumulation. It's believed the fat releases factors that are inflammatory, and that all cascades into this diabetes, hypertension, whole cascade that ends up to be fatal for a lot of people, hypertension, elevated cholesterol, and it's believed that THCV may stop all that. So the preliminary data here was really exciting because it supports that. But then at the 4-month follow-up, people started flipping out. The incidence of psychiatric disorders was alarming, like 26%. And the maximum ever reported before was like 14%.
That's because you said this one was man-made, right?
Yes, it's a totally synthetic cannabinoid. And this is the important point. It's an agonist. It's got all the THCV properties except the neutral.
Just to be clear, though, it wasn't THCV that was synthesized. It was actually a different version.
Yes,
of
it was a synthetic version
Right.
with a different molecule on it.
THCV light.
Right.
Yes, that's why I had a hyphen there. Didn't I say THCV light?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the point is, it affected the receptor metabolically, we believe, and there's been two additional drugs I won't bore you with because their names are complicated, but the point is, they all end at the same place, that until you can create a neutral antagonist, something that turns the receptor off, you end up with all this agony from the agonist, okay? Because it's on, and you get that burnout, the tachyphylaxis, you burn out your receptors, you end up depressed and suicidal, because it's almost like the end of a cocaine, if anybody's been there, sadly, with me, at the end of it, that's where you're at, and that's what happened to these people. You want to kill yourself when you run out. I don't mean run out of cocaine, I mean run out of metabolism.
Well, they do want to kill themselves.
So anyway, they confirmed that this all was from the CB1 receptor. The problem is it's not a neutral antagonist. That's apparently hard to make. But why make one? Why not just use the real thing? So what does THCV do? As I said, it's the big modulator. When it binds to the CB1 receptor, it controls. The great thing for people that like THC is very stimulatory, and that stimulation causes the munchies, causes agitation and paranoia for some people. A little bit of THCV in the product is very calming, and that occurs regardless of dose. So the rest of the characteristics of it are it's biphasic. What does that mean? It has a different effect at low dose than at high dose. So you don't need very much for appetite suppressant. Now, the search on AI that I told you about is going to come up with a dose range, something like, let me see if I can find it. I don't know if I have it. It's something like, well, let's see. Well, anyway, I'm going to save that for a minute. It comes up with a dose range that says 10 milligrams is the high dose. Okay, that's the AI stuff that you get. That's the old THC chart. And as any author will tell you, the way you would calculate a dose if you wanted to calculate it is not the way I did, what works for me, or gee, what's in the literature. You really have to think about it, and the best way to figure it out is what would be the equivalent dose of THC to get the same effect. And basically, what the high dose little round things that are I'm not an expert on THC at all, so I can't tell you anything except urban poison and things like it. But most of the quote high dose things are coming out at 25, I think. And so there was just this new study that came out. This guy, Gregory Smith, he works at a pharmaceutical company, Nexel, I think it's called, and Next Therapeutics in Florida. They're responsible for most of the stuff that AI gives you. It's not, he'll, in here, if you ever read this study, it just came out in Cannabis. It's the first, quote, real science I've seen on THCV. It came out in February 2025 in the journal Cannabis. It's another lousy study, but the effects are, because instead of just studying one or the other, either CBD's effect on appetite or THCV, he put them both together. So now because there are studies in the literature showing that the brand of hemp oil that they distill it from, which is mixed with CBD, they have some other stuff. So the predicate for the article, they just keep piling on top of it, but you don't have any pure THCV science here. But in this study, there were 2 dose ranges, low and high. The high dose range was 16 milligrams of THCV and 8 of CBD, which gives you 24 milligrams. And that's the only group that lost weight. Okay, right near my dose. So they put it on these there are these strips that absorb the THCV and CBD, and you put it in your mouth. It's like doing I'm having a tincture, basically. It's like doing a tincture. Only it stays infused on this strip longer than, so it literally sits on the saliva and is well absorbed. So there is now one real study establishing in 44 patients that at the right dose, THCV does cause substantial weight loss in 90 days. And that's been our experience too. I recommend, if you're really interested, you read it. So the obvious conclusion from all this is that it make a great weight loss agent, but why doesn't it work all the time? In some people, THCV is, in fact, it just has no action to dampen their immune system. So why is that? Well, I believe, and I don't know, is Anne-Marie here? No, I guess she left, so she's missing her part. I personally believe that breaks in DNA coding are responsible for the problems at the CB1 receptor. It's genetically encoded. Now, whether we can treat it with, oh, here she is, Anne-Marie, I'm talking about you.
Sorry, Christine FaceTimed me in the middle of your thing.
All right, so I'm talking about what this is all about. This is so metabolic syndrome, we talked about it before. That's likely the result from the same thing, breaks in genetic coding or broken genes. That at the end, what's happening is at the CB1 receptor, there's miscoding. So the appetite is always on. Okay, so people that have broken DNA at the CB1 receptor, like me for sure, I just had my DNA done. I don't know if that's the receptor they're testing for. If not, I hope they do soon, because I guarantee you mine is broken.
We test for leptin and ghrelin, so yeah.
So leptin and ghrelin are the hormones associated with all this. And it's actually now being called the leptin endocannabinoid system, because leptin may be the key player in the whole thing. Leptin is how cells communicate with one another, and when leptin signaling isn't intact, the best way to think about it is starving in the midst of plenty. The fat cell thinks it's hungry and it's full of fat all around it. So you need to restore leptin signaling, and that's one thing that THCV seems to do. So the point is, we can't fix our genetics, but THCV is a very impressive band-aid so far.
I agree with you.
It seems to work across the whole panoply of entities that are involved in metabolic syndrome, because the basic science that's out there shows that HDL levels go up, cholesterol levels go down, C-reactive protein levels improve, waist size increases, diminish. I can tell you, I lost 80 pounds in a year and a half, and I've kept it off. You can see real pictures of me before on the internet. I won't put them side by side because it's too embarrassing. But look at videos of me. I was huge. It's the first time I've said this in public, by the way. I was really big. And the thing about it is, what people that take THCV tell you, and if you study it, what's most interesting, they'll tell you things like, I don't have any food noise in my head anymore. The constant pressure to eat. I don't feel like I need to eat when I'm full anymore. I don't get up in the middle of the night and come downstairs and just eat. You know, what is that all about? Well, let's see. I only have a couple minutes.
No, you've got 15 more minutes.
Oh, I thought, all right. So what else does THCV do besides the CB1 receptor? Well, it has effects on all the receptors. And let me point out something really important about CB1. I don't know if anyone's told you this, but I'm a doctor. Do you know why marijuana is so safe? Does anyone know?
You can't overdose.
It doesn't affect your breathing.
Well, and why doesn't it affect your breathing? There's no CB1 receptors in the brainstem. It's the only place in the human body. Amazingly, the endocannabinoid system is everywhere. The only place there are no CB1 receptors is in the brainstem. And that means that any dose is incapable, because I told you, THC and THCV in particular is always down regulator. So THCV is a down regulator, all right? It would stop respirations at a dose. It's incredibly safe because there's no receptor there. And that's why everybody who's high on THC isn't going, you know, because if you took a lot of other drugs, you'd be panting, you know? So it has no effect on respiration, all right? But other than that, it has an action in all of the CB1 and CB2 receptors throughout the body. The important CB2 receptors for the purposes of THCV are everywhere. For my purposes, they're in fat cells, okay? Because fat cells, when storing fat creates inflammation, which triggers inflammatory pathways. And CB1 calms down inflammation. CBDV, which shares a lot of the same properties of THCV, both of these entities are the nervous system's calmers, right, at those receptors. No significant adverse effects have ever been reported with natural THCV, okay? And that's why I have that natural word there. So we talked about the munchies. The primary thing is the olfactory bulb at the base of the nose. This is kind of interesting, I mean. Why does THC give you the munchies, right? So what happens is, I actually researched this for this presentation. Thank you, everyone. So a bunch of stuff is happening at the same time. A lot of it, some of it is inbred, that we're used to associating the sight and smell of food with pleasure. That turns on our dopamine. And so the next time we see food, we go dopamine and we're happy. So that's the background neural excitation that's going on. The next thing is that the smell of it excites the senses in our olfactory bulb in our nose, right? And then what happens is that triggers these pleasure sensations that go into the hormone cascade that drive everyone to eat, right? And then, so when you give, I don't know what happened to my slideshow, when you give someone THCV and you, Doug, I need you to fix my slideshow, please. When you give somebody THCV, will you make it play, please? THCV, and it replaces THC on the receptor, the munchies go away. And THCV is fat stored, so that means it's gonna stay there for 30 days. So anyone who's taking it for weight loss, you lose 2 to 3 pounds in the beginning, 1 to 2 consistently over the course of time. And you know what happens? It's very strange. And I'm gonna try to show it to you on here if I can. Well, okay, so these are all the things that THC is supposed to be great for. There's no science, but basically all the things that make up metabolic syndrome should potentially be improved. Seizures are a separate category, but they too, because it's a modulator, it should make everything better, all right? So these are all the other receptors, and again, I think an interesting one is the 5-HT receptor, because of course that's the pathway that antidepressants work on, and THCV contributes to positive effects of that system, whereas THC does not, and I think that's where the synthetic drug went awry, is it doesn't have the psychiatric modulating effects, so they doubled the incidence of psychiatric effects that you'd see in a product that was natural.
Right.
And that's what happens when you screw around.
Exactly.
All right, so I thought I had a slide here about, maybe not, I might not. All right, well, I can make it up as I go along. So I think that the important thing about THCV is the studies all show the same thing, that if you, as patients and people, depending if it's a study or just people taking it, not only do they lose weight, all the associated metabolic parameters improve. So the annoying thing to me about metabolic syndrome is it's a laboratory diagnosis, and I say over and over again, I don't treat labs, I treat patients. So, but the entire diagnosis is predicated on you have to have 3 out of 5 abnormalities that are in the diagnosis, and the one is systolic blood pressure, which correlates the least. The other is waist size, which is the worst of the biometrics, and the other 3 are lab tests, right? The triglycerides kind of testing, but all of the parameters except blood pressure were improved by THCV. THCV had no impact on blood pressure, and it did improve waist size, but that wasn't statistically significant in his little study. But what happens with they call it appetitive behavior. I just learned this word recently. It's like, the tendency to eat. I don't like it's hard to say, and it sounds like other things. But having said that, it's kind of an interesting word because it's a food-seeking behavior. And so what the point is that I think that THC's role in the endocannabinoid system is through energy and metabolism balancing. So the administration of THCV improves all the energy and balancing requirements. And so when that happens, it reverses this whole metabolic syndrome. Let me look at what's in it. Yeah, so it starts with a signal to the hypothalamus, which then affects the hormonal reactions to what's happening at the CB receptors. Because what's happening here is the effects of THC and THCV are not the drug itself, they're the biochemical reactions induced in our body when they land on our receptors, right? And so if we're smart, we're gonna find the versions for ourselves that do the things we want. For me, that turned into finding something that didn't make me high, because I'm high all the time anyway, and didn't make me fat, which led, and in THCV are so many clues to metabolic syndrome, because I had my labs done, and it didn't fix my family has elevated cholesterol, not very much, like 200 or something like that, and I refuse to take that drug because it sucks all the cholesterol out of your brain and makes you stupid, and I'm dumb enough already. So having said that, it's been that way forever. My mom lived to 104, and I didn't treat hers either, but it didn't fix that. So it doesn't fix inborn errors of metabolism. Okay. It won't cure your essential hypertension, but it will impact the neural pathways that disorder impacts. So THCV is a modulator of your impaired and broken genetics, for a lack of a better way to say it. And it offers a lot of promise. The really cool thing is, with the advent of the cannabis community's interest in it, it can be synthesized so easily now from CBD oil that it can really be put in almost anything. As I said, I showed you the chocolate bars and stuff. So I personally am responsible for half the market. I've tried them all. So does anyone have any questions? Because I only have 10 minutes
You're
left.
selling these tablets, you're saying they're 25 milligrams.
Oh, they're not tablets, they're gummies. They
They're
taste really
gummies?
good.
Okay, so they're gummies.
I'm not selling them, they're his. They're removed from me, my picture's on them.
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Okay, so they're supposed to be 25 milligrams each of THC?
Each one is pure THCV with
These are
whatever it
don't
takes
have
to
that.
turn it into a
I
gum.
do agree with what you're saying, I just don't see it that high dose being necessary.
Well, you can cut one in
Yeah.
half if you want. Oh,
Yeah.
let me tell you about patient experience. Okay, the bottle says no crash, no cravings, no kidding. We printed that, and I tell you it's true. We've sold, I don't know, Cage would have to tell you how many bottles. Not enough to pay for the investment, bye. But having said that, we've sold a lot of bottles. We've had maybe 10 people call and say it makes them high. Further investigation, they tell me fuzzy, woozy, happy, whatever. They don't mind it, but they're worried about going to work. Okay, I tell them to take it at night. That seems to help. You develop some tolerance to that. But some people are sensitive to THCV, and at high doses, as you saw from that slide, because it's biphasic, it can cause THC effects. So if you are, and other people are completely insensitive. Those are the people that call me, and there haven't been many of those, 2 or 3, and they say it didn't work for me. I say double the dose, and if that didn't work, quit. From the constant agonistic stimulation that's occurring in people with metabolic syndrome and obesity, it takes a massive dose in some people like me to restore balance. Then as I went along, now I take 2 a day. I can tell you there's no side effects at 12. So, as I said, it's not how to do science, yes? But that's how I do it.
Yeah, we're at booth 536, by the way.
Sure, I got one for you. So we're seeing a lot of similarities, like for the side chains with the CBD versus the THCV.
Yeah.
Before you answer, let me say a lot of these states are banning this right here. As a marketing standpoint for a company, would it not be advantageous to switch into something that's not banned across some state guidelines when you're seeing a similar effect as far as the
Absolutely. I think most of the you would have to ask Lenny that because I'm sure he knows better than I do. And I don't believe anything I get about this stuff on AI. But what I learned is so do you know why the endocannabinoid system developed? Was in the early days when food wasn't this plentiful out there. It was developed as a reflex, we believe, genetically to make people have food-seeking behavior so they didn't starve to death. The problem is that in Western society, that food-seeking behavior is bad for us because we get enough crap already. So most of it comes from CBD now, I think. I don't know, is it gonna get banned?
Well, there's a few states. Missouri's banned THCV. I think there's like 1 or 2 more, but it seems to be a trend. We know that THCV is not nearly as psychoactive
As
as
CBD.
THC counterpart. So what I'm seeing, like companies like Variant, they're a Bev company. They've switched their THCV out for CBD so they can continue to benefit.
I think that, as I just made one brief comment that I think it shares similar effects, although it may have less psychoactivity. And I think if you could probably make a pure weight loss product out of it, a good one.